Universities have a long and storied history of collaboration with community organizations and organizers. Yet, these collaborations are not without their challenges, as wealthy, predominantly white universities must address issues of power, privilege, and competing priorities with these collaborations to succeed. While decades of research and experience have illustrated some best practices in academic community collaborations, the COVID-19 pandemic, the co-opting of research, growing public support of advocacy movements like Black Lives Matter, and the increasing relevance of social media have forced community organizers to engage in new and creative efforts to support their communities. How can universities best evolve to collaborate with and support community organizations amid these new challenges? As an attempt to address these questions, this virtual event highlights the perspectives of three Latina organizers with decades of experience advocating for and with Latino communities. Through their shared experiences, these community organizers will offer guidance on what academics can do to best support the communities with which they collaborate. Hi, my name is Keenan Colquitt. I'm the program lead for Diversity Scholar Engagement at the National Center for Institutional Diversity, NCID. I facilitate programs and initiatives such as the Diversity Scholars Network that are committed to advancing understandings of historical and contemporary social issues related to identity, difference, culture, representation, power, oppression, and inequality as they occur and affect individuals, groups, and communities and institutions. We are proud to sponsor this program in collaboration with NCID's Anti-Racism Collaborative, the University of Michigan's strategic space for engagement around anti-racism research and scholarship, and part of the Provost Anti-Racism Initiative. We thank our additional co-sponsors, the Department of American Culture, Latino Studies Program, the Carceral State Project, and Poverty Solutions here at the University of Michigan. On behalf of myself and these co-sponsors, we welcome you. We begin this presentation with a land acknowledgement. The University of Michigan is located on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people. In 1817, the Three Fires Confederacy made the largest single land transfer to the University of Michigan. This was offered ceremonially through the treaty at the foot of the rapids. Through these words of acknowledgement, their contemporary and ancestral ties to the land, and their contributions to the university, their contributions are renewed and reaffirmed. Now, I'd like to introduce our moderator for this event, who will in turn present our panel, Dr. William Lopez. William D. Lopez is a clinical assistant professor in the School of Public Health, a senior advisor at Poverty Solutions at the University of Michigan, and a 2022 Research Community Impact Fellow with our Anti-Racism Collaborative. He teaches classes on the social determinants of health, health communications, and the impacts of immigration and police violence on communities of color. The son of a Mexican immigrant mother and a Texan father who grew up in San Antonio, Texas, before attending the University of Notre Dame and receiving his PhD in public health from the University of Michigan. He lives in Ann Arbor with his partner, 2 kids, and the cutest pup in @PandemicPup. Bill, thanks for moderating this event.
Dr. Colquitt, thanks so much for having me. Very excited to be here today. Great, thank you everyone. I want to introduce our guest, and before I do, as a teacher who has been teaching online frequently, I can't help but welcome some folks in the audience. Just reading some names. Hi, Kathy, Esmeralda, Hannah, Jack, Jamie, Jessica, Miriam, Sylvia, Terry, and others. Welcome, and thanks so much for joining us. I'll begin by introducing Gladys Godinez. Gladys, do you want to turn your mic on and join us? Thank you. Gladys was born in Guatemala and made her way to Lexington, Nebraska by way of Inglewood, California. She has been an activist and organizer since the age of 15, when she co-founded a high school group named Nuestro Futuro to change the narrative of what it means to be Latino in the rural US. Gladys is organized with a range of organizations, including Solidarity with Packing Plant Workers, a statewide grassroots group that shines light on the injustices within meatpacking plants. Gladys is the co-founder and co-director of United by Culture Media and the host of the podcast Courageous Mujer, where Gladys aims to embrace, uplift, and celebrate Latinas in Nebraska. Hello, Gladys, and welcome.
Hola y buenas tardes. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Cecia Alvarado, I'd like to introduce you next. You're welcome to turn on your camera and mic. And Gladys, you're welcome to leave yours on as well. Hi, Cecia. Cecia was born in Costa Rica and moved to the United States when she was 16. Currently living in Nevada, she is the executive director of Somos Votantes, a Latina-founded and Latino-led organization dedicated to empowering our Latino community with the information and tools they need to fully participate in democracy. Cecia is the founder of her own consulting company as well, Latino Outreach Solutions, LLC, that supports the inclusion of Latino communities in political campaigns. Despite all her professional engagements, Cecia continues to volunteer in her community and recently volunteered on the COVID-19 task force by Nevada Legislative Hispanic Caucus and serves in a number of committees focused on research to improve public health in Nevada. Cecia, welcome.
Buenas tardes. Thank you so much for having me.
And last, I'd like to welcome Karina Perez. Hi, Karina. Karina is the daughter of Salvadorian parents and currently lives in Columbus, Nebraska, by way of California. Karina is the executive director of Centro, Hispano, Comunitario de Nebraska, which fosters change for immigrant families, learners, and entrepreneurs through direct services, programming, and advocacy. Karina, welcome. We're happy to have you today.
Thank you, y buenas tardes a todos.
Well, great. It's so good to be with you three in this conversation about what it means to collaborate with communities and community organizers. I can tell you in putting your bios together, it was a workout. You all are so very accomplished, and I had to shrink it down to that half a page, which was very challenging. So before we get into the main, to the meat of our discussion, let's help the audience know a little bit more about you. What's something interesting that I didn't see on the internet or that I didn't see on your bio that just might be fun? Cecia, unfortunately, you're to my left, so I'll start with you. What's something interesting about you the audience could know?
I think what's interesting about me is that I was born in Costa Rica. I was raised in Panama. I also have the opportunity to live in Nicaragua and then move to the US. So I I am an immigrant. So have definitely experienced being an immigrant in different countries and our Latin American countries and the culture shock.
Great, thanks, Cecia. What about you, Gladys? What's something you could share with our audience so that they could know you a little bit better?
Well, I wanted to share recently, my dad had a birthday. He turned 74. So happy birthday. Feliz cumple, Dad.
Feliz cumpleaños.
Yes. As you all may know, immigrant families, our parents are not into storytelling. You know, they may land into it like inadvertently, but they don't just jump in. So I found out from my dad that he loves guitar and just instrumental music and acoustics. And he said it at least 3 times in my lifetime that he wants to play guitar. So I finally got him a guitar this birthday, and he was so happy, smiling with joy. And I was just happy that I was able to make that happen for my dad. So I was really filled with joy to be able to see my 74-year-old dad finally get his guitar and be able to play with it.
Awesome. So Gladys, I'll ask you later to tell us about your podcast, but you're going to invite your dad to the podcast to play guitar?
I told him I'm willing to record. We have the equipment, so I'm ready for, his own. We're no longer doing DVDs, but I'll put them on Spotify or something.
There you go. I look forward to it. Hi, Karina. What's something we could know about you to know you a little better?
Yeah, so mine also is in relation to my father. Mi papa, his first job in LA was in an airplane factory. So they worked in constructing parts for airplanes and aircrafts. And so we all strayed away because he would push on us, like, when you guys grow up, one of you guys is going to become a pilot. We were all like, No, no, but life is really full circle. And so I will be going to attempt to get my pilot's license in the next couple months. So it's a really exciting time for me, and really, really strange at the same time to go back into this memory of his and to kind of complete some of his dreams as well.
Wow, yeah, guitar playing, airplane piloting. Awesome, great. Thank you all so much. Well, wonderful. So we want to talk a little about what it's like to be community organizers and to represent your communities and speak with them in many ways, and to collaborate with universities and researchers and academics. So to get us started, maybe you can tell us about 1 or 2 projects you've been on in which you've collaborated with a researcher or a university. And you're welcome to not disclose what university, what researcher it is if you don't want to. So feel free to be anonymous. Gladys, since I started with Cecia last time, I'll start with you first.
I love that. We're not picking on Cecia all day. I appreciate that. All right. Well, and just how I met Dr. Lopez is through the University of Michigan and University of Iowa reached out to me after we responded to a raid here in O'Neill, Nebraska. And O'Neill is about 4.5 hours northeast of Lexington, Nebraska, which is where I live. And they reached out to me because we responded to a raid that affected more than 100 plus families in our communities that were separated in August of 2018. And since then, you know, there's a whole story, right? They met with me, they met with individuals that were affected by the raid. And then at the end of all of it, to this day, I still have contact with Dr. Lopez and Dr. Novak and are able to see the fruition of all of the work that I have done. And I can talk a little bit more about this a little later, but I just really appreciate the fact that I'm still in this conversation. As community organizers, we're just doing, right? We don't sit down and we don't take pictures and selfies and say, okay, this is what we're doing today. We're feeding the fam, you know, like we're really focusing on just doing, being active and working hard on the ground. And this gives me the opportunity to have a longer impact, not only with myself, but with students that are researching raids, students that are researching immigrants, students that are researching themselves, you know, in rural America. So I'm grateful, and that is one of the projects that I'm really happy about.
Well, great. And Gladys, you said we're just doing. I like that quote a lot. Because one of the things that I think is critically important for universities to understand is just how busy and how active so many of the community organizations and organizers really are, right? And what it means for us who spend lots of time sitting at our desk behind computers, what it means for us to collaborate with you. Thanks so much. Karina, what's 1 or 2 projects you've worked on with the universities or researchers lately?
I actually have 3, and this is just examples of different strategies that have been approached. And so the first is with UNMC that I could think of, and we've done a couple of these with focus on minority health disparities, and collaborating with them on the research side on whether or not, you know, getting individuals or focus groups to the table and participating on those ends and those pieces. On the other end, you know, we're on where we're not necessarily participating, but we're taking in the information and the data from the University of Minnesota on welcoming and belonging strategies and how it's helped move communities forward, and, you know, using that data for us to collaborate together on something that they've already done. So not reinventing the wheel, but really working with each other to extract that information. And then another piece on the ground level, you know, we as a local smaller communities, we don't have universities nearby, but we do have community colleges. And so collaborating with them on putting together things like Latino youth summits, where we're bringing students across the state to give them the opportunity to also see possibilities for post-secondary education opportunities or different career tracks that they may be able to seek. And so just different variations of where we have found ourselves connecting with academia. So.
Great, thank you. And you mentioned, I want to come back to this next, but you mentioned using the data from a university to not reinvent the wheel. So I want to bookmark that and come back to it in a second. So Cecia, what's a couple of projects you might have worked on with the universities?
Yeah, most recently, well, a big scope of the work I do, it's I work in we do elections. So right now we are at our prime of our election time for the midterms. We rely on the polling, a lot of the polling that comes out of universities, because those are trusted messengers in our communities. So for instance, the University of Reno, Nevada just released a polling, which I tend to pay more attention to than, compared to other pollings, because we know that, the process and the way they do their polling and the sample size definitely is more accurate and is more in, community voices than sometimes when we see national pollings or other organizations and companies, right? Like when we're trying to look for more accurate data. We know that the community is more receptive to speak to them, and especially the Latino community. So I appreciate the work they do to help us and guide us, right? Especially when we are relying on this data to come out, to strategize in plans. I'm very excited about a project that I'm also working alongside the University of Reno, Nevada, and our CDC Foundation here. And we're doing an assessment on public health. And so we started with different surveys and have been making assessments. First, we were making an assessment on how heat is impacting our community, how it's impacting their ability to exercise, as well as like how our community has access to more healthy options. Right now, we're making a bigger assessments on our communities, and specifically a breakdown in communities of colors. We're in the research process of putting together the process. So I'm part of that steering committee that's working to analyze where we are on housing, where we are on income disparities, so we can push that data forward for next year's legislative session.
Great, thanks. And Cecia, you describe universities as trusted messengers in some cases. Say a little bit more about that. That was reassuring for me to hear, but when is this the case, and what can we do to make it the case more often? Absolutely.
Well, I work with Latinos. I've only focused on working with the Latino and the Hispanic community, and under that umbrella with immigrants and our undocumented community as well. So we know that education is huge in our communities. We value education. We see education, that is our gateway to, get out of poverty. And it is translate to knowledge. If you are the kid that goes to school in the family, the one like you're the go-to person for everything. It's like Dr. Lopez, like, where do we go for this? And so, you have an education, you become a trusted messenger. Your knowledge is trusted within your familias. And that also expands to our comunidades and our communities. When they see you, well, this is coming from a professor, so it must be true. So it really does has played a big role here. I know that because the universities are not just institutions where we are going to get an education, they're also involved in our communities. They're also bringing resources into our communities, right? If we look at the School of Medicine and the University of Las Vegas, Nevada, they're in the communities. They were in the front line when COVID was happening. So it goes beyond just, an institution where you go and get a degree. It becomes community resources. It becomes a place where you go and you need help. If they have their tax or accounting departments, they go there because, they have questions. Here in the University of Las Vegas, Nevada, we have an immigration law clinic. So if they have questions about immigration, they go there. So if the university, it's a resource for our communities, they become a trusted space too. So I trust them. I'm going to go talk to them. I trust them. I'm going to tell them what's going on in my life. And we trust them. I'm going to answer the questions they're asking when they're doing the research. And more especially, so I would say when it's someone that looks like you and speaks language on the other side.
Great, thank you. So definitely speaking to the value and importance of representation of academics who are working with and for sometimes our own communities. And going back to you, Karina, you mentioned using the data to make, you said not reinvents the wheel. I like the way you said that. Give us an example of that.
Yeah, so actually we were, in our case, for this particular one, we were looking at the University of Minnesota's data in regards to welcome and belonging strategies and how effective there was, what the measures were proving, and it was that those that felt welcome, you know, I think it was 86% were more likely to stay and make home for 5 or more years. And so with that, you know, we started to think and analyze those strategies that were laid out. And with it, we concluded that there were specifics about having a place that curated that sense of belonging. And so we actually, from that, brought to life a welcoming center idea, which we're now in the middle of a capital campaign for, to bring to life a welcoming center in a rural community that would then embrace the pieces of belonging. So what happens after I get, you know, my water connected and I don't know where to connect with people? Because yes, we know like the physical things that we have to do to get connected to the things that are day-to-day needs. But when it comes to our people daily, like person-to-person needs, there's not a place to go to that would help you figure that out. And so with that came to life this idea and this concept based on research that we have read.
Okay, great. Gladys, does any of this ring true to you, using data and bringing it back into your work?
You know, one of the biggest things, and I think Karina touched on it, is just using that data research. We always lean on research to be able to say, hey, we're going to do X to be able to help our community. So for example, for me, we're doing storytelling, changing the narratives within rural America, specifically with people of color and youth of color. So we've looked into data and research from universities to be able to back our organization and make sure that they understand why it's so needed in our communities. There's minimal in regards to rural America, which is exciting. Then there's opportunity to be able to look into that and how it will impact the work that we're doing here in our community. So I look forward to someday working with a university to look into that, wink, wink. And then also
take notes.
Just yes, please take notes. In general, just being able to lean on information. And so we always look into data, and you know, our foundations are always looking for that information too. So we lean on that as well.
I would say even Gladys, touching base on some of the conversations we had on being BIPOC-led organizations and how much we use data to help drive funding, decision-making, like, hey, we're, you know, this is where we're getting left behind. This is the data, like, this is not just us, as many across, and it's a nationwide situation. And so that's definitely something that, you know, Gladys and I have bounced around many times in many messages. And so it's really helpful for organizations like ours too, that don't have that access here locally, but the data that comes from other universities really matters.
And I would add to that, as especially us as women of color, you know, that data validates our stories too, and the stories of our community. So we can talk about health disparities, we can talk about housing disparities, but unless we have data, you know, those stories really are not heard the same way. So the data really just validates the work we do and the stories of our community.
I love that. I love that. I have two questions. One is super boring, and then one is super fun, so you can pick. One is, all three of you have talked about where you or how you're combining data and storytelling and why that's important. I'm curious where you learned that and how you do that. And the second is, how do you access the data? Do you ask someone? Are you Googling it? Are you looking at the university library? Either of those questions. Karina, what do you think?
I'll start with the how I access the data. Usually it's by accident, or like someone's like sending it out. I happen to run across it and I'm invested, and I take in more than I should, but it always usually has, what I love about data, usually has the resources that they're using, so I could really pick apart some of the stuff that I really want to go into depth into.
I'm going to follow up with that question just briefly. So is it something that you've Googled or something that you emailed? And I do invite the audience, lots of us who are thinking of what do we do with this data once we've published it, to listen to how our panelists are accessing it, right? And if there's a gap, maybe it's something we can address. Go ahead, Karina.
It really depends on the subject. So like for health disparities, usually, we're connected in the health department world. So public health is really connected to us in some ways. So usually we'll get that forwarded to us directly from them or from their universities that they're working with. Other times it's just research that, other foundations have found that have been helpful, foundations that are funders who are working towards equitable practices, and they're like, here's information on this, take a peep at it. And here we are, you know, where we then get, we're digesting that information as well. And so that's usually the way that I found it, or if we're directly reached out by a university that we're doing collaborative work with. And then that's usually the only direct contact we've ever had with those things.
I can jump in if that's okay. I used El Google, so that is definitely something I use. So tag all of your articles on your websites. And then the other thing is, when I was in college, I used JSTOR a lot, and we are aware that there's different articles out there in the research world through universities. If we have access to those articles, they're not easy to find, they're not easy to print, and some actually ask you to pay to reach. So just be aware they're not very accessible at some point for individuals such as myself. So I do use Google. I follow a lot of universities that are doing similar work, or nonprofit organizations that are doing similar work, and I sign up for newsletters. So also, if you put your articles in newsletters, I'll have a bigger opportunity to be able to click on it and read it.
It comes across by accident too. Someone sends you an email. It's very rare that you are including in a briefing. So we usually have to find our own data, look for it. Sometimes I call around different institutions to figure out, do you have data on this? Have you done a research on this? So it really is challenging, especially when you work in policy. You need data to back up, like, you know, why you're trying to move something forward, where you're trying to make changes. Or you just, like I said before, like, data helps validate our stories, and said, if I'm working in the community as an organizer and we hear stories from our communities, and you want to be able to have or see, you know, compare some data. Unless I have data, they're just stories. They don't become anything other than that. And it's very challenging to find like actual data, but especially when it comes to like communities of colors. So I've, you know, just out of luck sometimes, again, now that I'm work a little bit closer with different institutions and part of different committees, they are, you know, sending data our way, or they're teaching us where to get the data. But sometimes the data alone is not enough. You have questions, you want to follow up. Who are these people? Do they speak English? Do they speak, they spoke Spanish to them? Did you ask this question? How you frame it, right? Like everything that comes with the data for us to understand it, like how do we get here with those numbers? But unfortunately, you're not able to ask those questions because maybe you got data that was released a year ago. They're probably moved on already.
Gladys, you're shaking your head emphatically. You want to add to that?
Oh, I was just saying yes, 100%. I love that Cecia is bringing up we read these journal entries. We read all of it, and we definitely see how you have done your research, right? So who are you asking? How are you asking them? How are you involving the community? And if it's validated by the community. If we see that it was only done in English and there was 300 surveys sent out and it was a Spanish speaking community, then unfortunately that data is not valuable, or it has validity to us as we use it.
And the more specific, I would say, it's trying to get data specific about our communities. I had a really bad experience this week about a research that was done on women of color. And basically the poster said to make it valid, they also included 100 white men to validate how we feel about our bodies. So that's also why it's so important to be part of the process when the data is being released, so we can ask those questions as it's happening, right? Like we want to be able to question and like how you did this, what is the sample size, like who was involved, what is the process? Because we know the process behind it. Like we know, you know, that sometimes they just want to get the data out and they're not really talking to us about what, you know, our communities really, you know, are you really going deep into our communities? Are you using Spanish speakers? Are you reframing this question to maybe like your audiences? descendants, or let's say they're from Mexico or Latin America, how are you framing the question? So definitely those things play into account when I'm looking at data and say, is it one message fits all, or how was this conducted?
Cecia, with that, it brought me to a conversation I was just having recently, which is the extraction process of getting information from the people that are participating in this research becomes very transactional, and we lose the piece of people connectivity and relation building, that we forget that these are humans too that we're talking to use for this data. And so how we go about that is also a practice that I think we need to be discussing. Everything's so transactional nowadays, and instead of receiving individuals for their people and their stories, and it goes back to that storytelling piece, are we, through this research, are we allowing them to relive some of their trauma for the purpose of research? Is that valid as well? And if it is there better tactics that we could be using for that storytelling?
Yeah, thanks so much, Karina and Cecia. This is getting to one of the questions I wanted to ask you next. Generally speaking, what have been some and some more, in this case, of the challenges of working with universities? And I want, again, my audience, who I believe is largely researchers and professors and academics like me, I want us to take note. What have been some of the challenges? And Gladys, we'll start with you.
One for me has been, let's see, let me just say this part. There's historical context in regards to universities and people of color, specifically in research, all the way back to Benjamin Franklin studying the Native American tribes to be able to establish and eventually colonize the United States, right? So I just want to be mindful of that. There's history, there's context. And through hundreds of years, now we're moving forward and we're here. And since I moved to back to Lexington, I was in Wisconsin for a while. I moved back to Lexington in 2016. Just in that year, I was surveyed for approximately 8 times from researchers that are trying to figure out diversity in rural America, from sexual health to meatpacking plants. And it can feel as though we're being over-surveyed to some extent. So having these conversations with community leaders and liaisons to be able to understand where we're currently at as a community and seeing what we're doing after the fact, after research. So with that historical context, one of my worst experiences, I'm glad Cecia shared one. One of my worst experiences was when we did a photo voice research with a health group from a university, and they came and with photo voice, you take pictures of community members tell their story via pictures that they have taken, and then they take information from those stories, which was to me, that's great. That's wonderful. We're telling stories, we're having this conversation that Karina's mentioning. And then after the fact, what happened was, because these pictures, I'm going to say, were not worthy of showing in a museum, they had a white photographer come to Lexington to take the pictures, and then they posted those pictures or shared those through the museum. So that was a really hard experience for me, to be able to trust researchers within that university, because after the fact, I shared what happened and nothing happened. And nothing was resolved, and it was really heartbreaking for me, because we shared very personal stories about living in mobile homes, or our refugee population talked about what they ate and the table and sharing those foods. And unfortunately, the message was lost because of what was being said by the actions that university did, which is, your story is not worthy. You're not worthy. At the end of the day, that's what it comes out to.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Gladys. I'm sorry to hear that. I appreciate you telling us about that. It sounds very much like what Cecia was said in her experience, this need to interpret it through, I guess in this case, a literal white lens, right? The white photographic lens, but the original data, stories in Cecia's case, and photos by Latina communities wasn't enough without that other layer of interpretation. Karina, Cecia, you want to just share one or two of the challenges of working with universities that we should take note of?
I would just say that sometimes, even at the end, the the data research, when it's finalized, doesn't come back to us because they don't see, like, they don't see us needing that information as well, even though we are part of the data, or we're part of pulling together focus groups, and then it doesn't get circled back to us in the end. I always find that super interesting on why that would ever be done, but it's happened to us a couple of times where we just never received the finalized report of what the data concluded, and so
Yeah.
take it as it is.
Right. That does seem like a common one. It was ironic. So we used in one of the my dissertation data was drawn from a survey done in our Washtenaw County community. Lots of, as you said, assistance in the organizing. It was finally published, but then it's behind a paywall, right? So the very people who contributed to the survey couldn't read it. In our case, we raised the money to make it open access, but there's still that barrier, of needing to raise that money. So I'll come back to ask you this after Cecia weighs in, but what is the best way for us to share it back to the community? But Cecia, why don't you go first? One or two challenges you've experienced with universities?
I think I would say I am an expert because I am one of them. I am a community. So it's also my story. I have a platform to elevate it and elevate other stories in my community, but I am an expert. Nobody knows Latinos more than me because I am a Latina. I am part of this community. I'm an immigrant. And we hear every day, whether that's through our community, through our own stories, through our familias, we know it. And so sometimes when we walk into those rooms, it's more of crosstabs, maybe yes, this, but maybe not this question, right? Or so those challenges is that we are the experts in the room, and we deserve to be treated as like the experts in the room as such. So I think that's some of the challenges, right? The challenges of not feeling heard through the process, if we are invited to be part of the process. So the pick and choose doesn't really validate our communities, but also like our own stories. And, unless you are in our communities, or, we have these conversations like Dr. Lopez, we have had the opportunity to talk about some of the stories, and it really sometimes feels like we're just not being heard through the process. And I think that's one of my biggest challenges. And sometimes I say, well, I don't have to do a research to know this. I already know it because I see it every day. But go ahead.
Yeah, great. I appreciate that. Like you said, you are the expert. It also just calls to mind a phrase we use in the academy that's always bothered me: the hard to reach populations. Because it's really hard to reach. Cecia has more people in her phone that she could contact than the sample size in the study. They're hard to reach. You just don't have connections, right? It's language I don't like using in our work. Karina, I wanted to come back. You said there was something I wanted to follow up on, slipping my mind, but I'll remember.
I think it was around how do we get it out, the research to the community.
Yes. How can we deliver that back to the community? Thank you.
There was some research done around meatpacking workers who endured COVID-19, and although there was some data extracted from them, I can't remember. Maybe Gladys can, how it was circulated back out to the community, but I think even then it's such a. I think it's been a challenging thing to do because I think understanding what the universities want the data to serve purpose for, and sometimes it is just for their own intentions and for their own needs. And so I think also having that clear understanding going into the research, so then our communities aren't waiting, or we're not waiting as organizations for that data to be finalized, that we may not even be able to have access to or understand it fully. And so I don't have a exact answer for that, I feel, to be completely honest, because I feel it's very, it depends on what the data's purpose is supposed to be for. And most of the time it's not intended for general public. And I think that's very unfortunate.
Thank you. So we can circle back to the question I asked earlier. All of you have mentioned the importance of telling the stories of yourselves and your communities, and sometimes integrating data to do that. And Gladys, I'll start with you because I've been wanting to bring up your podcast, and here's a reason to do it. All about retelling the narrative of what it means to be Latina in the Midwest and Nebraska. Why is this important, this telling of the stories, and why are universities helpful in doing it well?
Just beginning with Courageous Mujer, the podcast, it started out because I was seeing Karina in the room. I was seeing Cecia in the room. I was seeing so many people in the room during COVID. But our stories weren't being told, right? We were working, we were always busy, and we we're always doing something. So I was excited and really broke this down with my family. My daughter came up with the name, and she's like, Courageous Mujer, Mom, let's do it. And we started talking about the individuals that not only surround me, but definitely make an impact throughout the state, currently in Nebraska, and hopefully we make it nationwide. But it has been impactful, not only for me, but for individuals that do the interview, and as well as individuals that listen to the interview. So I am aware of, we have listening parties throughout the state that listen to the podcast to be able to hear our stories. And how can universities help? I think it's, for me as a first-gen student, it was hard to see my story anywhere within a predominantly white institution, because that's where I went to as a student. So I think it is very important for me to be able to see professionals in different careers impacting and making an impact throughout the state and also nationwide. And yes, we can Google, yes, we can follow specific pieces, but if within the institution, within those universities, we can start retelling these stories through their lens, you will have such a great impact for the students that feel welcomed within their homes. And I think that's the biggest piece for me in regards to universities and in regards to research specifically, just really finding a space to collaborate and talk to the community leaders and the community members. And I know it's called community engagement research. Am I right? Am I speaking academia lingo? Yeah. So I prefer that type of research rather than the helicopter research that has happened previously and continues to happen, unfortunately. And I've sat in rooms where research was starting, but it was interesting because one of the lead researchers said, but if you start with the community, you're going to start getting the no's, and you're going to start having to do focus groups, and then you're going to have to do this. And I was in the room, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm in the room. I don't know if you want me here, but I definitely encourage you to do community engagement research. So I don't know if I answered your question, but there it is.
That's great. Yeah, thanks so much, Gladys. Karina, or Cecia, you want to add anything?
I think some of the best research or base comes from just having conversations with people and allowing them to get comfortable with you. It doesn't take that much time or extra time to connect.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I will echo all of that. I think the qualitative piece of storytelling sometimes provides more depth than the quantitative. So
great. Yeah. Thank you. So there are many things that academics can do in communities, the communities with whom we collaborate, sometimes that are unrelated to the project. So I think about this a lot. Like, we spend time working with you all, working with organizers, as you all have pointed out. We do the work, we get the data out, and then what happens, right? If I think we've done our work well, we've built relationships, perhaps already had them, but at least built them with these communities. So I've talked with other researchers and just kind of thought about the stuff that's going on in communities that we are now connected to that we should also be aware of. So I kind of want to read that list, see what you all think, and then see what you want to add to it. So in a country, for example, in a country without universal health care and childcare, communities often use GoFundMes to raise money and support their needs. We can always be aware of what GoFundMes and fundraisers are going on in the community, contribute to them, circulate them, and spread news about them. Gladys pointed out, being a first-gen applicant to college, many of us in the university have lots of letters after our names. We can always work in the community with first-gen college applicants as people are reading and applying to college, and organize an event and just kind of help out. Sometimes there's language issues, right? Folks in the university may have maybe fluent in English or have a certain type of English that could be helpful for folks to learn. I think as academics, we always have the capacity to work through these language issues and support folks who have recently arrived. And the last thing I like to remind researchers, yes, we know how to use spreadsheets, right? We can do super advanced stuff. We can even write books, but a lot of times what I see in movements and organizing is that people need someone there to do things like spreadsheets and take notes, do roll call, and that all of our skills that we've learned throughout all of our education can be useful, not just the most advanced ones, right? So that's kind of a list I use in my head of like what to be aware of when I'm thinking and working with the community. Do those sound true to you? And what else would you add for academics who build these connections in their work?
There's a couple of things, if I may jump in.
Sure.
I found key practices for community engagement and research. It is from LGBTQ Health in California. I'll share it in the chat just so you all can see it. But there's a page specifically that talks about the pre-work, right? Doing the work with research and universities and communities. And then the during, which is the flexibility, the grace, the community organizing, and then the post, which is reporting back to the community. So I want to share that with you all. I think this speaks volumes to how you can do it. I know it's LGBTQ focused, but it definitely, for me, it felt like, oh my goodness, somebody already did this and packaged this for me and for individuals or organizations or universities that are looking into doing it. So I went ahead and shared it.
Great, thank you. Cecia and Karina, anything you'd like folks who collaborate with communities to think of outside of the project once we've built connections with our communities?
That's a great question. Well, but at the top of my head, I honestly don't have much to add. I'm not sure, Karina, but I think that's a really it's a question that actually it's making me really think about it. So thank you for pointing it out.
Sure. Great. And there's a couple of questions from the audience that I'll bring up too. Karina, do you want to add anything to that one first? Is there something we should think about when we build connections to these communities? Okay, a question from Beatrice. Sorry.
Nope.
No. Good. Great. Question from Beatrice. When looking for data and sources of data from researchers and universities, how do you feel about data that are posted on social media like Twitter?
I think for me, it depends if it has the follow-up link. Here, I'm not just seeing snippets of the research or a quote, like, quantitative data that doesn't have a follow-up link just thrown out there. Because usually they're not citing anything in one of these Twitter ones. And so, and if they do, it's, really small. I want to be able to go into the meat of the research. So it really depends on what they do to have access to the full research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Gladys and Cecia, do you tend to trust research you find on social media?
I usually even before I click on any link, I go to the person's profile and to see who they are. And then as a step two, that would determine whether or not I'm gonna click on the link, any link. It definitely does help, especially because for most of us, we're very active on Twitter, so you're trying to reach more of folks that are probably in the space, like whether that's community organizers, leaders, politicians. Like definitely Twitter. Twitter is your echo chamber. Right, versus if you're trying to reach community, but that's not the right platform. But it's helpful for folks like myself, because again, like I always double check, do my my due diligence to fact check, like who's the person, is this, I get a trusted messenger, and then I'll move forward. Yeah.
Yeah, you all are ahead of the game. I don't use Twitter that much. And so I do use Instagram and Facebook. And that's why Cecia said that's where the community's at. Facebook is definitely where the community's at for us. And Instagram, I really enjoy Instagram. And I do due diligence, like both of them shared. I go to their links and I go to their website and I research the organization before I even tap into the research that they're sharing.
Great. And I invite the audience to use the Q&A feature in the toolbar and send a few questions our way. I'll start taking those next. Before I do, I want to think about specifically the work you do with your Latino communities. So Gladys and Karina, you work with Latinos in the Midwest, and Cecia, you work with Latinos in Nevada. What should your audience know about the strengths and challenges of Latinos in the work that you do? And Cecia, we can start with you.
I would say the biggest challenge is language accessibility. And us also being mindful of the person's ability to understand how questions are being framed, right? Doesn't necessarily impact the level of education. So be flexible. And in such a diverse communities, such as in Nevada, where one of every 5 persons are born outside, were born outside of the U.S. So just be mindful of that cultural approach. So it's not just, are you approaching, Latinos, Hispanics, Latinx, or first generation, or are we, approaching us as a whole?
Thank you, Cecia. And Gladys and Karina, what should we know about the strengths and challenges of Latinos in Nebraska and rural communities?
I didn't grasp rural data because I came with national data, but I just want to back up Cecia's with some numbers. 72% of Latinos ages 5 and older speak English. So that's great, right? You're thinking 72%, awesome. But we're talking about the 28% that can't reach, we need to reach. And we're not only talking about Spanish, but we're talking about indigenous languages that are also very important, especially for our Guatemalan and Central American individuals that are migrating to the United States. And then another one is that we're growing. The Hispanic population is growing, and it's a beautiful thing. The challenge with that is that we have a lot of young families. So start thinking of how you can reach young families. We're talking about daycare. We're talking about pay for leaving work, right? If you're trying to do some research in communities and Latino communities, what does that look like for young families? Specifically for me, I have 2 kiddos. I have an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old. If you're trying to do anything after school, then that means to me that I'm going to have to bring my kids along. And how are you going to entertain my kids while I'm answering your questions? So just some thoughts. And then I'm going to keep adding because I have another one.
Sure.
4 in 5 Latinos are U.S. citizens, right? So we start thinking about Latinos and saying, oh, all of these immigrants. And obviously we get that narrative that all Latinos are immigrants and or are undocumented. So that is a strength, but we also have the challenge of the narrative. So just challenge that narrative.
Great, thank you.
I think I definitely want to uplift some strengths too, which is, the opportunity to have growth in BIPOC-led organizations around the state that are uplifting the voices of minority groups in different rural communities. And just seeing that come to life over the last couple of years has been really beautiful because it's not only raising that, it's raising organizers and activists, who are doing the work for the generations to come. And then also for those who had endured a lot more before us. And so I think that's been something that's just really blossoming and over the last couple of years and continues to blossom. And it's just exciting to see the different age demographics come together for this mission to across the state, especially in a state like Nebraska. So that motivates my work ultimately. So
Great, thanks. I want to take a question we got from the audience. When we are doing general research, we tend to end up with largely white data. In our lab, we are currently working very hard to make our research inclusive to all and empower our participants. What is the best way to encourage different populations to participate? I feel like we need to prove that we hear and see them, but first we need to get them in the lab to work together to prove we're listening and making changes. What's your response to that?
I want to see your lab. What does your lab look like? What does your college look like? Is it a welcoming space? I remember hosting events for when I was at the university, and we used to host events, but for my parents to get to one place at the university was chaotic. We needed a map and we needed to figure out how to get to a specific room. That's just very on the ground stuff. How do I get to your space? And is it welcoming for me? Does it look like me? Does it feel like me? Does it say you're welcomed and a part of this community? This university is for you, and that's why we're here. If it speaks like that, then I'll come to your university, I'll come to your space, and I'll help you develop answers for questions that you have. But if it's that ivory tower, I'm lost trying to find your location, I'm lost trying to find information in my language, then it becomes a lot harder for me to trust you, and for even to get to know you, because we don't speak the same thing, or we don't speak the same language.
I think that's a great response, Gladys. Cecia, what would you add?
Well, I mean, it's intimidating, even for all of us that have experienced college. Walking through those doors can be scary. Just being there, just finding parking at university, any university, good luck. But just being there, right? Showing up, it's pretty scary. You feel intimidated, especially maybe if you didn't get a chance to finish your education. So feeling like I don't belong here. I would encourage folks we have this model in organizing, right? That we meet the community where they are at first. Before we even ask the question, we go to where they get the groceries. We'll put a little table outside, start building that trust, have conversations, the school meeting. We go to the places of worship, and you start meeting them in those places, and building that trust definitely helps. And they'll come to you. They will eventually come to you because they feel like someone here is going to welcome me. And also someone here has good intentions. So they're not just a random person calling me. And it's going to expose whether it's my traumas or my stories, or make me feel less than, right? Sometimes when we are serving people for like certain topics and they just don't feel like they're empowered enough to speak on. So I feel that we definitely can do better in building those trusts with their communities, and then being also a bridge for communities to come to us. And the bigger story to that, it's when you create those welcoming spaces, they're really good at telling others, and they're really good at also now feeling like if I'm a mother, I'm empowered to come and be more involved with my children, to a place where I have been welcome.
Great. Yes, excellent response. I'm blown away. Karina, please.
Yeah, that's where I was going to chime in, especially for communities like ours where we don't have the research availability in our communities. And most won't have the research in the community that they're looking for, the demographic they're working with. So meeting them and going to them, I think has been the one thing. Like every time we have a research want to work with us, like, are you coming to our community? Because we won't have the accessibility to go to you every time for X amount of factors. And so meeting the community where they're at is number one for us.
Yeah, thank you all so much for bringing that point home, right? I often get this question about when working with mixed status with undocumented communities, how do we build trust? How do we eliminate fear, right? And I always remind folks that fear serves a protective purpose, right? And we don't want to just eliminate this fear. Like, fear serves a purpose. Particularly at the University of Michigan, the School of Public Health is right by the hospital. There's lots of security vehicles. right? And I'm not going to invite my guest lecturers to park and potentially get a ticket that could result in a police officer, that could result in arrest and deportation, right? So I think it's just for us as researchers, critically important to understand there's often little incentive and lots of danger for folks to be coming into our labs and onto our campus. And what does that mean? As the three of you and others in the comments have said, we bring our research outward if possible. And if it's not possible, there's a real tension there.
I would also
Sure,
say,
Karina, go ahead.
sorry, now I would also just add, like, if you have the incentives and the dollars in your research, you should also be contributing to these individuals who are partaking in your research and not expect them to provide you 1,000,001 things, and then always come back to them without without you expecting them to expect nothing of you. And so let's be mindful of the people that we take a lot from, because these stories are their lives, and we need to reward, well, not reward, we need to compensate them for taking the energy to share that with you.
Yes,
Great.
exclamation marks all day, Karina, for that. And I'm jumping in. I'm sorry, Dr. Lopez, but
No,
I do
please.
want to share another resource. It's from Define American, specifically for journalists that work with undocumented individuals. But I think it definitely touches about how to talk to individuals that are undocumented and what you need to think through before you start talking to us, you know, especially if we have limited status.
Great, thank you. This is a really good question too, Anonymous. I know we need to tell our own stories, but why do we have to actively engage in fixing institutional problems we didn't create? It's exhausting. How do you stay energized doing this work? Who wants to start that one?
Can I just send a hug? You know,
Yeah.
can we just do just a full hug for everyone that is currently going through this? I have stepped away from really strong on the ground community organizing for my own mental health purposes. So now I have flipped the switch and gone into narratives and finding joy in the work that I do. So I'm not saying quit your job, but I am saying find space where you can take a breather and then express that to the lead of your university, whoever that may be, or the work that you're currently doing, to find that space, right? Because you're going to do some heavy lifting. You're going to do some heavy work in that department. And you're talking to people that are currently going through a lot of trauma and a lot of the things that may be impacting you, especially if you are an immigrant, you're interviewing immigrants through a traumatic event such as a raid. That really hit me so hard. I went through depression for 6 months. It hit me, and you know, to someday Karina was there. She saw me. You know, I was blank for a while, and then we went through COVID, and that hit me again. And then I was like, okay, no, I got to step back. I gotta pause. I got to check my mental health. I got to be aware of where I'm at. And I found joy in sharing stories and making sure that our stories are being told here in rural Nebraska, but also nationwide. So it is very interesting. I send you a hug first and foremost. And then I hope you find space where you feel safe to share the issues that you're currently going through, specifically in the universities that you're currently working at. And then those that are currently here, if you are in a position of power that oversees research like this, if you can take that space too with your staff to be able to give them, you know, embrace and build a safe space for them to be able to decompress, to find their joy, and sometimes do retreats. We've done retreats. We've done a lot of mental health work to be able to stabilize ourselves after traumatic events.
Yeah. First and foremost, you know, sending love. And we do the work we do, we're sometimes reminded every day to have to relive our own traumas, right? And then you feel like that guilt of like someone else has the words. Like, at least I have a platform, or you know, I'm documented, and you start really just going through like checking your own privilege, right? To say, you know, my traumas are probably less than, so that's not a good practice. I would say personally, it's really hard sometimes, especially when it's out of your hands, like you can't do anything, right? And you just feel like, so what am I doing here if I can't stop, you know, a family from being separated, if you can't stop, you know, someone, a Latina, from having to close a business because they can't afford childcare. It's really hard, but it's also a reminder that just our struggles are so big, and our challenges are so big. We just can't stop fighting. And there's been times that I have to share my own story. I've shared my story, and a professor here included in his book, and the university also wanted to include me on the series of Latinx voices. But when they sent me, going through the process, really reminded me like the questions they ask you, and was very emotional. And then they send you the draft, and it's like, here, relive it again. So I just kind of like, I was like, I don't even know if it was ever published, because I am never going to give you a review on my own drafts. Like, take it from me and don't ever talk to me about it again. So it's, sometimes it's hard to expose ourselves, and as Latinos, you're not really taught to protect yourself, right? You just have to be tough, like no queda de otra, like you have to keep going. So I think it's at least myself, something that I have not been able to overcome. Like that you should always, we have this narrative in our community that you have to be strong, you have to be tough, you have to work hard. And so it's putting up this very, very strong like phase. And especially when a community sees you as the person that can help them. And so yeah, I think those are like, definitely challenges that I hope that one day we can overcome. Unfortunately, I don't have best practices because I feel like I haven't found my middle ground yet.
Thank you, Cecia.
I think for us, kind of going back to Cecia, acknowledging that it's not always easy for us to step away from this work, for very many reasons. And, it is our day-to-day, it's our living. And so for us, it's been really about practicing not just safe places, but brave spaces. It's really something that we practice in our office, that if I'm coming in because I'm dealing with a lot, I'm going to be brave enough to know that who I'm with and where I'm around is not just safe, but I'm brave enough to also show up in the state of mind that I'm in. And so we practice that a lot frequently in our spaces that we're in, and creating those kind of places of vulnerability where we can process a lot of what we're going as organizers. And I definitely send a lot of great energy to everyone who does this work, because it's definitely needed on a day-to-day basis.
Great, thanks each of you for sharing.
It's
Cecia?
about to say, I'm just thinking, right? Sometimes I think to myself and say, if I don't do this, are we going to allow someone else to tell our stories and the stories of our communities? I don't know if that's necessarily the best answer, right? To say, keep exposing yourself and your trauma. But that's how I feel sometimes. It's not even an option. You have to do it, because if you don't, who's going to tell the stories of your community? Who's going to, be the voice? And that's how I look at it sometimes. So, again, I don't think I have the best advice, because it's definitely a journey that I'm going through myself, and say, like, how much longer can I, do this? Like, how much, longer can you go? Like Gladys says, like, I have to step away from the space, right? But it's like, how much longer can we go on, seeing and fighting for our communities? And sometimes it feels like we bring so little back to them, like, right? Like, it's like we work at elections and say, we're gonna elect people that are gonna help us, and you have to trust this person and vote for this person. And then we deliver, we do the work, and it's like, what happened? Nothing happens. When we tell our communities, like, tell your story, because someone else needs to hear, your struggles and traumas in order for them to take action, but then nothing happens. So we're exposing, our own community, and sometimes that's really hard to do too. So when others reach out to us and say, like, hey, I'm doing this research, or I'm looking for this person, can you help us find, X amount of Latinas or Latinos wanna like talk about this issue, and then you go and recruit them on their behalf and tell them, oh, yeah, it's okay, and that it's not a good experience too. So just a lot of factors that come into place, but I think it's definitely a good discussion or a deeper discussion to have on how we deal with our own traumas.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cecia. That line made me smile, and I saw Gladys smile too. Can you help us find X number of Latinas or Latinos for the survey, right? Just, Karina shaking her head. It seems like a common one. There's that person who gets asked to be the bridge for the rest of the sample that's needed. And as the three of you pointed out, it's often an exhausting role. Someone asked a very related question. Despite feeling disrespected or devalued, what makes you be willing to take part in university collaborations? That's a hard question. Karina, do you want to start?
I think for us, it's because we know the data matters. We know that it could create really long-lasting change, or the opportunity for long-lasting change, and it's not always followed up. And I understand that, but just running the risk of it, that data helping to change some systemic things, is the opportunity, or the glimpse of hope is what keeps us driving, I think. And it's usually that, just the opportunity exists for some change there. It's usually what drives a lot of our work. And so here we are, continuing at it.
I love that. I hope that echoes with other academics in the audience, right? That glimpse of hope that we may gather the data that has the power to shape the narrative in a useful way, right? I'm going to carry that with me in my own work. Gladys and Cecia, what gives you the courage to continue risking these collaborations?
I feel like I'd rather do it myself. I think it goes back to our previous conversation than to, because we need the data. We need the data. And like I said many times throughout this conversation, we need the data to help us validate our work, to put the value into our community voices too. And we are speaking, on data for say Latino voters, right? That's how we are able to also get resources. And so, and we need the resources to do this work and to continue to do the work in our communities. So we need each other. We definitely need each other. Maybe we haven't found the perfect the perfect middle ground for both sides, but we definitely need each other. We need each other to do this work for different reasons.
I love that, Cecia. 100%. We need each other. I have to be honest with you. I lack a lot of trust with institutions that come to me. So I do vet and I do ask questions, and it's basically an interview for them rather than for me, to make sure that our community is respected, our community is front and center. And unfortunately, there's universities that don't appreciate my vetting, so then they don't move forward with working with me, which is okay. It's okay. I it's your grant, it's your money, it's your school. I understand the importance of the research, but unfortunately, I am not at this moment in my space, in my mindset. I am not going to put my community in a space where they can get re-traumatized for your grant or for your research, if it's not something that's going to come back to my community and assist our community in a positive way. And that's really tricky, right? Because like Cecia said, we need each other. And I would love to collaborate with very much a group that is very intensive in community engagement, that's very intentional in the welcoming and belonging piece, that's very intentional in hearing our voices and validating our communities. So I lean towards saying no rather than yes, specifically if people are coming to me on research and surveys through our community.
Great. And Gladys, I love that. And, I always encourage community organizations to remember that you have the right to say no, and that vetting is super important. And you can, deny researchers if you don't want to collaborate with them. You're also, welcome to say yes for reasons that you all think is important, but also welcome to say no. Gladys, briefly, when you're vetting, what are some of the questions you ask? And I don't want, us as researchers to check these off, but thinking of it as a to-do list, these are things that are legitimately important for an organizer. What are some of your vetting questions?
Oh, that's interesting. All right. So I look at your team, your research team. I look at your plan. I asked to look at your grant to be able to see what is all inside of that grant and what the deliverables are for that grant. I see if what will come back to our community specifically, and just have an interview with them. And usually there's students involved. So how much do students know about our community rather than just jumping in and throwing an intern into our community without any knowledge of the community or without any introductions? So it's very, I ask a lot of questions. I research a lot. I like to do my background work just like you do, anybody that's doing the work. So it's very interesting because a lot of people are caught off guard. They're like, wait a minute. And I'm like, well, per your website, I see you have X, Y, and Z. So tell me how that's going to work for our community.
I love that you ask for the grant, and I love that you look for the deliverables. That's great. And I hope whenever we're writing the grants and writing our deliverables, we write to the community we're collaborating with. That's great. Karina, Cecia, you want to add anything in those vetting questions before you work with the university?
Gladys, that's amazing. I'm sorry.
No,
Go ahead.
I was just saying,
Lots of enthusiasm, yes.
allowing us the flexibility to add to the deliverables or take away, because that's something that Gladys and I have talked about a lot, that they plan out these really specific deliverables that are unattainable and unrealistic for our communities, or even for us as organizers, like it's just not going to happen. And so allowing that flexibility to exist as collaborating, and look at it from that lens. If we're going at this together, or you're using us, we're collaborating at this point forward. And we hope that they see that relationship as that moving forward.
Cecia, if you want to add
Great
anything?
insight. Yeah, Gladys, like, thank you so much. I never even really thought about consider like going through, the grant deliverables. As people that work in nonprofits, we all have them, right? We all have a very specific, like, who to work with, who don't work with this person, or don't, we're looking for this specific metric. So I think that is a great advice that takeaway for me. Will definitely include that moving forward. I usually get so excited because I don't really get many opportunities to be part of an entire process. I would say we, as an organization, we do a lot of research. Our president and founder, who is actually she's visiting us here. She's actually an alumni from Michigan University. She, as a Latina, she conducts a lot of research, has done in the past year. So through that process, I'm learning more of, doing this work, but also like being, working with our communities, and as one of them, right? Like I said, as one of them, because I've never really have been, included in a lot of it. Most of it's like, can you help me recruit, this X amount of sample? And to me, it was like, oh, wow, like they're actually including me. I thought I was enough. So now I know better. And through doing like my own in the process lately has been the questions that, I'm trying to see exactly like not just the questions there, but how are they going to reframe this in their summary? What is your, what are the story? What are you the story that you're trying to tell through this research and the data? And it really depends. There's two topics that I'm very sensitive about, like either, if I don't agree with the way that it's being conducted, I just don't want to be part of it. And it's just one that I just don't participate at all. And it's anything that has to do with opiates. We through the work that we do, again, taking it back to politics, sometimes it's used between candidates to attack each other or whatnot. But the deep trauma of our communities and how sensitive this is for them to speak about it. I learned that we don't ask me for it. We don't participate. And when people are talking about immigration, and when people are asking questions that relates to immigration, and I want to know, and I want to make sure that they're also including like mixed status families. So it really just depends, but the bottom line is that I'm not included in a lot of this process.
Great. Thank you. And my dog started barking, so forgive me for having to get up in the middle of that important response and work from home risks. So you also all mentioned, and I believe Karina, you brought up working with BIPOC leaders, right? So I wanna, before we wrap up, there's a couple of questions I wanted to get to. And one is, what's become the importance of doing intersectional or collaborative work in your organizing?
For us, can you just repeat it one more time just to make sure I get it?
Sure. Yeah, just what's been the importance of doing intersectional or collaborative work, organizing with other community marginalized communities in your organizing?
I think for us, it's been perspective, you know, and storytelling piece components. It's what drives our work, being able to share the different lived experiences that are at the table, and being able to um, capture the needs of our community, and you know, not just the needs too, but also the wants, the desires that they want and envision for their community that they have called home. And so that's really what's moved the collaborative for us, and across the table, and not just locally here in our county's work, but you know, across the state. I think it's really poured over into those that we collaborate across the state with, and seeing that, and it's really um, led us to move our work through those shared experiences and those lived experiences and that storytelling component piece of the work, through collaboration. And that's where we get a lot of that.
Thank you. And Gladys, anything you want to add?
I think collaboration is very important. Again, the vetting is included on my end. So I always talk to our organizations or businesses that attempt to do work with us to be very intentional. Intersectionality is very important to us. We're looking into LGBTQ, diving into LGBTQ community this coming year, 2023. We have a lot of Latinos that are closeted or want to come out, but they don't feel safe in rural spaces. So we're looking forward to allowing that space, or hopefully making some space where they feel safe and welcomed through United by Culture Media. So we're on it. We love collaborations, intentional collaborations that are very intentional in helping our communities move forward and upward.
Great. Thank you so much. So it's about time for us to wrap up today. This is a personal question that sounds like a great one to end on. And quoting this, gracias amigas, could you all speak to being a Latina in this work? What is it like? And what are some of the advantages and experiences? And with that, you can also add any closing words that you want. Anyone want to start?
For me, it really moves my work. It really is my passion being a Latina, you know, a Latina woman, and my experiences that come with it. And it allows me to connect to the sacrifices and the history that my parents carry to allow me this opportunity to be here. And so for me, it's a way of giving back to all of their sacrifices and hard work to be in this space. Something that I don't think they ever imagined, you know. Now they look at these kind of work and they're like, that's your job. You know, like that's what you get to do. You get to lift voices for others, and it's a humbling experience, and it moves my day to day.
I went to the school for teaching. So initially I went to teaching at the university level, and then I came out with poli-sci major, and I did a lot of human services work. So domestic violence advocate, sexual child protective services advocate, to career counselor. And I've landed here now. And I just feel like my whole path has been healing. And this for me is healing. The work that I'm currently doing has helped me heal a lot. And I have the luxury to heal, right? We talked a little bit about that, the privilege that I can step back and say, okay, I'm going to follow my passion, but it's all thanks to what Karina said. It's all thanks to our parents making that decision of immigrating to a country that gave us those opportunities. So I am really grateful for the privilege that I have to be able to follow my passion and find joy in my work through healing. So that's what I I love about my job. And that's what continues to push me. And I also just want to say thank you to Dr. Lopez and Michigan University. Thank you all for being here, the participants that are here listening to us. I appreciate you all for taking this time. This is a really important topic. We want you in our communities, right? We want you to help us, but just come talk to us, like we can do it together. We just need to have a conversation. Thanks.
I really want others to see the value, and I may take that back. I want our community to feel how valuable we are in different spaces, whether that's through collaborating for research or in politics or in the civic engagement nonprofit, or if I'm helping a client connect with Latinos. I want my community to feel value. I want my community to know that, we need their voices and their stories and their voices truly matter to all of us. It matters to me so much that I want everyone else to know, what we go through as immigrants, as mothers, as business owners, as students. I really feel, and I'm getting emotional, but I really feel that we can change this narrative. So there's definitely so much value in the work that every single one of you do, whether you're Latino, whether you're immigrant, a person of color or not. But if you have the best intentions, our community will welcome you. I know that. I see it. We don't just welcome Latinos, we welcome anyone that wants to hear our stories. And I think my biggest takeaway of being Latina is understanding that every single one of us and the work that we do, really, we do it for our communities. I don't think we're definitely not doing it for the money. That's for sure. No, but true is that we are doing it for our communities. We're doing it because we've seen it through our families, and we see our families go through the struggles. And what inspired you to be here today, it's because you want to change that. Maybe you couldn't change it for your parents, or you couldn't change it for yourself, but you know that now you have a platform to help change it for others. And I think that's the beauty of the resilience of all of us as a community. So I truly believe that as a Latina, that's the value I bring to the work that we do.
Well, great. We're Cecia, Gladys, and Karina. It was a pleasure to be with you all in community today and to learn with and from you and the work that you're doing. I always like to invite participants to drop a thank you in the chat for our panelists. You're also welcome to click on whatever emoji reaction in the tool panel best expresses how you're feeling right now. And Gladys, Cecia, and Karina, please just observe the emojis and observe all the thank yous and know how much we appreciate your presence here. With that, I'll turn it over to the NCID and Keenan.
Thank you so much. This has been awesome. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to Gladys, Cecia, Karina. Bill, thank you very much for moderating. We have placed Twitter and Instagram information in the chat, but for those watching online, you can follow Gladys at Instagram and Twitter at Courageous Mujer. That's going to be at COURAGEOUSMUJER, and listen to her podcast. Cecia is at Twitter, at Cecia Alvarado. That's CECIAALVARADONV. And Karina, you can follow her organization on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Bill, Twitter at Lopez_WD. And thank you very much. Please complete our post-event survey, which is at the end of this discussion, and continue the conversation online at #NCID anti-racism, and follow us on Twitter at UMISH_NCID. Thank you very much to NCID's event production team and to you for joining the conversation today. Please help us out by completing that anonymous survey that'll pop up. We encourage you to continue this conversation and stay tuned for future events. Until then, thank you all very much.